The World Ends With You is an action RPG developed by Square Enix originally for the Nintendo DS, and was met with widespread critical acclaim upon its original release in 2007, taking the platform by storm. The game has what I can only describe as a cult following, with many JRPG fans hailing it as one of the best video games ever made, and on a personal level it's one of my all-time favorites as well. I've never really enjoyed traditional JRPGs like Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest, and yet The World Ends With You captivated me the very second I picked it up. With me recently playing it for a second time, and an anime adaptation on the horizon, I decided now is as good a time as any for me to take a look into just what makes the game so great, so unique, and why it struck a chord with so many people around the world. The World Ends With You follows a boy named Neku Sakuraba, a grouchy teenage shut-in who despises other people and has headphones constantly glued to his ears in order to shut them up. He doesn't care to hear about the values and convictions of other people, and instead believes that the idea of letting others into your life is nothing but a big fat waste of time. As the game begins, he awakes to find himself mysteriously placed in the middle of the Japanese district of Shibuya, with zero memory of how or why he got there. He's quick to realize that the hundreds of people that are crowding the streets cannot see or hear him at all. He's become invisible to everyone else. Shortly after his rude awakening, Neku receives a text message on his phone. Reach 104. You have 60 minutes. Fail and face erasure. A timer appears on his hand, signifying how much time he has left to complete the task. Neku has found himself a player in a dangerous and inexplicable game, organized by a sinister group known as the Reapers. He must complete the various missions given to him throughout a 7-day time period, or be wiped from existence altogether, erased. The game follows his efforts to survive the Reaper's game and uncover the truth of why he's playing it, but he can't do it alone. In order to survive the game, one player must be partnered up with another. This allows them to defend themselves against the deadly monsters that hunt players, which are called noise. To survive, he'll begrudgingly work alongside a cast of memorable characters: the bubbly and eccentric Shiki, the cool and mysterious Joshua, the kind and level-headed Rhyme, and the headstrong loudmouth Beat. Neku must learn to work with and trust his partners despite his beliefs, or be faced with certain death. Now that you know what the game is about, it's time to get into the game proper. For the purposes of this review, I should tell you that I have only played the Nintendo Switch version of the game, Final Remix, and so that's the version I'll be discussing. I can't really speak on the original DS or mobile versions of the game, though I have heard that the original DS version trumps them all. Perhaps I'll get around to playing the game on there someday, but I digress. Being made for the DS originally, the game's combat is entirely touch-controlled. Every in-game action can be done by using only your finger. When playing with the Nintendo Switch docked, instead of adopting traditional button controls, the game makes you point one of the Joy-Cons at the television, using a pointer as a makeshift finger for when you can't actually touch the screen. If you're really looking to enjoy the game, your best bet is to ignore that and play the game entirely in handheld mode, because the pointer controls, while functional, are pretty uncomfortable, and I found my wrists hurting very much when trying to work them. In any case, the combat system in-game revolves around these little pins that you collect, which serve as your attacks. Each pin you acquire has a different design, attack, and command attached to it, and you can have multiple equipped at a time depending on your level. For example, one pin allows you to create a stream of fire by dragging empty space on the ground. One allows you to strike a foe with lightning by tapping on them. Another allows you to swing at enemies by slashing them on the screen. Some pins allow you to heal, etc., etc. There are quite a lot of pins to collect throughout the game, either bought from shops or acquired from defeated enemies, and part of the fun is trying different pin combinations to see what attacks will suit your playstyle the best. And that's not even to mention the partner system. Throughout the game, you'll be accompanied by a partner character at any point in time, and each of them will have their own unique attack that's activated by a certain touch command. It may be tapping, swiping downwards, or holding and dragging on the screen. If Neku and his partner combo their attacks together in succession, one after the other, they'll begin to build up the sync gauge in the top right, which, when full, will allow the player to use a super-powered attack. It can be a good idea, depending on what touch command your partner uses, to equip pins that will make it easy for them and Neku to chain attacks together. For instance, Shiki's touch command is to tap an enemy. In order for you to easily chain her attacks with yours, you may also want to select an attack for Neku that's activated by touching an enemy. That way, the combos will come naturally. A key feature of the gameplay that directly affects the battles is what is called the trend system. All clothing items purchased from shops in-game, including pins, are associated with a certain brand or manufacturer. At any given time, you can open the menu and look at the left side of the screen to view which of these brands is the most in style with the people of Shibuya. If the clothing you decided to equip to Neku or his partner belongs to a currently popular brand, that equipment's stats will go up considerably, and any pins belonging to that brand will also see a huge increase in power. Inversely, if your equipment belongs to a brand that's ranked low on the trend chart, they'll actually see a decrease in power instead. So it's important to watch the trend chart as you play to help you decide what clothes to buy and what equipment you should bring into battle. Sometimes it can be the difference between a win and a loss. And if you're repeatedly getting whooped by a bunch of enemies or a boss, don't worry. The game's difficulty can be changed at any time, and it's even a factor in gathering pins. The more you raise your difficulty, the harder enemies will be, but the rarer and more powerful pins you will find as rewards for defeating them. If you lower it, your enemies will be weaker, but you'll receive significantly less rewards for battling. With that in mind, any difficulty setting can essentially be a double-edged sword, each with their strengths and drawbacks. However, if you're simply seeking to enjoy the story with little to no obstacles, Easy Mode offers a rather relaxed experience and will do you just fine. To top it off, the game never forces you to battle with random encounters like many RPGs do, allowing you to choose your own battles and take the game at whatever pace suits you best. All in all, The World Ends With You's battle system, although the controls may take some getting used to at first, is a fantastic work of game design and is just one of the many things I love about this game. Using simple touch, drag, and swipe commands for attacks, it's fast, fun, and easy to jump into at surface level, but also has a ton of depth behind it for those who are willing to explore it. However, its gameplay is only one of the amazing things that this game has to offer. Although The World Ends With You does have great gameplay, it's my opinion that the most outstanding element of the game at large is its presentation. Everything from the visuals to the music is a joy to behold. When I first saw the trailer for the Switch version a few years back, the visual style immediately stuck out to me as something unique and something exciting. Sharp, stylish art taking heavy influence from comics, with characters and objects having jagged edges, exaggerated proportions, and color palettes that practically jump out at you. Each of the characters have a certain style about them in their appearance, in their expressions, mannerisms, and most notably their clothing, that communicates exactly what kind of person they are without using any words. An idea that defines fashion as we know it today. To show what I mean, let's take a look at one of my favorite characters from the game, Mr. Hanekoma, or simply Mr. H. Mr. H is the owner of a coffee shop in Shibuya. Throughout the story, he appears to Neku and company to give them advice and wisdom as they make their way through the Reaper's game. Now, take a look at his appearance in this one still image of him, and see what you can infer about him based on it. Well, the first thing I notice is that he appears kind of messy. His hair is a little all over the place, his white shirt looks loose and kind of wrinkly, and he's got some scruffy facial hair. Those things coupled with his easy smile and his hand that's casually placed in his pocket communicate his laid-back, friendly, and easygoing nature. However, he also has an air of maturity about him that could show he's seen the world and holds on to some great wisdom. And his sunglasses might even tell you that he has some secrets behind that smile. You see what I mean? I'm no designer, but I don't think I need to be to know that this is fantastic character design. Probably some of the best I've ever seen come out of a video game. And almost every character in the game, even the less important side characters, have defining features like that both accompany and reinforce their personalities. The game's character designs were handled by Tetsuya Nomura, the character designer behind both Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts, and I'm a huge fan of his work here. As a matter of fact, you can find this kind of outstanding graphic design present everywhere as you play through the game. Even in the game's logo itself, which seems to loosely resemble a city skyline, not unlike that of the game's setting, Tokyo. I find myself continually amazed by the game's art even after having finished it twice. From its character designs to its imagery, it communicates its cool, stylish, almost teenage atmosphere incredibly well through its visuals alone, and its style is one of the things that the game is famous for amongst most RPG fans. It's easily one of, if not the strongest element of the game, and that's not even to mention the music. Alright, so it's time to talk about this game's music. Now, I gotta be honest with you guys here, I didn't even write a script for this part, because, well, it's difficult to put into words what I'm about to say. That didn't make any sense, what I just said. What I mean is I find it hard to write down on paper how I feel about this soundtrack. For this segment, I feel like it's better for me to come to you with how I feel about this soundtrack in the moment, and, well, let me tell you. This soundtrack rules. It's got to be one of the best video game soundtracks of all time. And well, let me try to explain why. Instead of doing what most RPGs do and having a soundtrack that's symphonic, almost fantasy-like, it instead opts for a more urban feel for its music in order to reflect the setting of the game, Shibuya, and also what was popular at the time. And I mean, it has so many different kinds of music in it. Whether you're into pop, rap, hip-hop, punk rock, death metal, there's some jazzy tracks in there. I mean, regardless of what kind of music you like, there's going to be at least one track in here that you're going to like. And that's one of the genius things about it too, because one of the game's overarching themes is that people are different from each other, and that's a beautiful thing. As a result, there are all different kinds of music in it, and you're going to be hearing it constantly as you play throughout the game, whether you're walking around, whether you're in a battle, whether you're watching characters talk to each other in a cutscene. It's everywhere, and it's a joy to listen to. Almost all of the game's music was composed by Takaharu Ishimoto, and I had to give him incredible props for this soundtrack, because the game, quite honestly, would not be as entertaining as it is if it were not for this amazing soundtrack. I feel like to end off this segment, it's much better for me to just let the music do the talking itself, instead of having you listen to me talk about how good it is. So, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Take a listen.
Expectancy, centrality, you're out of control. Controllers waiting down below. You still lack an experience. Too bad, too close, too late to notice where you are. There's no other way. Dependency to the tendency. Occasionally you misunderstood. Living a life of mediocrity, hypocrisy, legitimacy. Go over it, game over now. Is this a place to shine? Sit down to it or climb right. It's your turn to throw the dice. But tell me who you are.
And now to discuss the final and one of the most important pieces of the game as a whole, its story. Unfortunately, The World Ends With You is one of those games where it's difficult to talk about the story too much without giving a bunch of crap away. But I'm going to do my best to explain why this game's storyline is the icing on the cake to an already fantastic game, without spoiling the whole thing for you. Here goes nothing. The World Ends With You has a pretty hefty amount of characters in it. I already mentioned the 5 primary ones, Neku, Shiki, Joshua, Beat, and Rhyme, and these are the characters you'll become most familiar with as you play the game. The main story is pretty short by RPG standards, clocking out at about 17 hours, but despite that, the game manages to give adequate time to each of the main characters, developing them, giving them background, and showing what their relationship with Neku is like. Speaking of Neku, the story is very much centered around his relationships with the people he meets inside of the Reaper's game, and how they affect him. It's very satisfying to see how he grows as a person throughout the story, and his character is certainly one of the highlights for me personally. But aside from Neku and company, there are a plethora of incredibly fun supporting characters that help make the story so much fun to go through. I mentioned Mr. H earlier, who's probably one of, if not my favorite character from the entire game, and he doesn't even have all that much screen time. This is the same for most supporting characters in the game. They don't usually have that much time in the spotlight, since more focus is given to Neku and co., and yet they make such an impression when they are on screen that they stick with you even when they're gone. A great example of this lies in one of the game's many villains, Sho Minamimoto, who, despite being more of a secondary antagonist, has become a fan favorite for his cool design, his over-the-top attitude, and his weird thing that he does where he incorporates math terminology into his speech. In short, this game has plenty of incredibly entertaining and memorable characters sprinkled all throughout it, and they're all so distinct in their designs, personality, and values that there's bound to be at least one character that speaks to you. Additionally, I should mention that the written dialogue for these characters is simply fantastic, and it gives them a great deal of both believability and humanity. Not to mention the writing has quite a lot of charm and humor, which makes the game infinitely more enjoyable to go through. Between Neku's snarky comments, Joshua's biting wit, and Beat's hilarious grammar mistakes, there's plenty of humorous banter between the characters, and I definitely laughed out loud more than once. It constantly keeps you entertained and keeps the story from ever getting boring, and that's something I have to commend the writers for. But enough about that. How's the actual plot itself? Well, in truth, at the beginning of the game, the plot is kind of basic. Most of the time, the missions that Neku and his friends have to carry out are as simple as get from point A to point B, and don't always amount to much more. Sometimes, however, a mission will have Neku work to solve the problems of Shibuya's residents, and these make for some very nice short stories in which you get to learn more about the fictional depiction of the city and its inner workings. They're an excellent change of pace when they appear. But the truth of the matter is that this is, for all intents and purposes, a very character-driven story. That said, the plot itself is certainly not without its twists and turns, far from it even. As the adventure goes on, more questions go unanswered. More truths are revealed, more characters are introduced, and the stakes begin to climb even higher. It becomes an exciting, suspenseful, and fast-paced fantasy thriller that's complete with hard-hitting emotional beats and mature, thought-provoking themes. There's a great deal of mystery at play all throughout, and there are definitely plenty of surprising revelations to be had about Neku, his friends, and the Reaper's game, all topped off with an incredible climax in the endgame. All in all, it has to be one of my favorite stories ever told through a video game, and it is, without a doubt, one of the biggest reasons for playing. The World Ends With You is a giant of a game. It combines approachable yet multifaceted gameplay with striking visuals and art, a diverse and consistently stunning soundtrack that's a joy to listen to, and a story filled with lovable characters, crazy twists, and profound messages. It's very easy to see why this game is so beloved by those who have played it, myself included. It's a perfect storm, a celebration even, of art in its many forms. Music, graphic design and visual art, the narrative, the gameplay, they all come together to shape this game and make it what it is. If even one of them were lost, the game would more than likely be a shadow of what it is today. Seeing its art and hearing its music almost stirs up a creative spirit inside of me. Makes me want to go and make something myself. I suppose all I can say to try and do this game justice is this. The World Ends With You is, and will always be, one of the most unique and creatively inspired games to ever come out of the industry, and an experience that I'll not soon forget.
Beautiful sky, brighten with thee, smiling on me. Oh, beautiful world, shiny and free. It's all for me. I don't have no pride, I don't have no money, but I've got these hands. I'm feeling alive with you right beside me. Come on, my hand.
Hello, viewer, and thank you for listening to me ramble on about a 13-year-old game for over 15 minutes. In all seriousness, I do love this game, and I seriously recommend that you go check it out if you have the time and the means. I played it on Switch, of course, but I also believe it's available on most mobile devices, and of course on the DS, but I think it's going to cost you a pretty penny to actually get your hands on a cartridge. In any case, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for watching.